You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything. Conversations with the icons of our time.
It's astonishing, that to find people who really believe that Forrest Gump exists. I mean, even though they know it's just a character on the screen. That is fascinating me.
The creator of Forrest Gump, author Winston Groom, today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Only a handful of books ever get made into a major motion picture. And of those, only a tiny few create a character so memorable that they live on in our imaginations for years to come. The author of one of those books was Winston Groom. Now, he had modest success as a writer up until 1986 when he produced a book called Forrest Gump.
My name's Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump.
Since its release in 1994, Forrest Gump has become one of the most popular movies of all time. It's consistently on lists of top 100 best movies ever. It produced several phrases that have actually become part of our everyday lexicon.
Mama says stupid as a stupid does.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Run, Forrest!
And it produced the character that we all remember, Forrest Gump. In 1995, Groom wrote a sequel, a book called Gump and Company, picking up where Forrest Gump leaves off. Now, being a huge Forrest fan, I jumped at the chance to talk with Winston Groom about this book. In just a moment, our conversation.
Come back with us now as we relive a little piece of our cultural history on Now I've Heard Everything. This interview is from Bill Thompson's 30-year archive. Enjoy.
So here now, from 1995, Winston Groom.
I was so anxious to come back to the story and figure out what happened. What happened to Forrest after we saw him in Little Forrest at the bus stop?
Did you ever think about a career as a book critic or a newspaper? I mean, I got $20 here. Give me some money of it. No. Well, that's what I was trying to do. I mean, just to finish out Forrest's story, it is My Lights, Let Me See It, which would be from the end of the last book and where the movie shut down back in that 1979 or 80 until now, which is, the mid-90s. And I can't see any further than that. Another 15, 20 years, who knows? Maybe there'll be a Gump and Company Part 2. But I didn't think the story was over then. And I was really pleased that I had the opportunity to go on and let him rip, see what happens through the 80s.
Well, what happened to Bubba Gump Shrimp Company?
Went under. Had to do that. Because I had to put him in a bad position, you see. I mean, in other words, if you picked up the book and Forrest is riding high, well, it's hard to bring him down, so I brought him down before we started.
But then, I mean, you created that kind of tension, too, because I wondered, well, all right, now what's he going to do with Forrest? I mean, how is he going to bring him back up again, like you said?
That's what I asked myself every day when I sat down to write it. And I didn't write with an outline, that's the truth. I just said, well, what's he going to do today? That's the way I write this particular book, very much unlike anything else I've ever written. It's pretty spontaneous.
Well, that's the way Forrest is, isn't he?
I think so.
I mean, he doesn't. It doesn't strike me that he does a whole lot of. He thinks about the future, but I've never got the impression that he really plans too much ahead.
Well, it would be difficult to write this kind of book if it was too contrived. In other words, if I'd sat down with a long outline and notes and this, that, and the other, I don't think it would have worked as well. Obviously, I had things in mind. I mean, because you're looking at a timeline of 12 or 15 years of history, but I just let it go, and I'd say, well, all right, now here he's going to wind up here, and then he would either extricate himself from that situation, such as the inventing new Coca-Cola, or he would get in deeper and deeper. And I'm not sure I'd recommend that as a device for aspiring writers, but it worked for me this time.
Well, there's a simplicity that has appealed to so many of us about the Forrest Gump character that almost defies outlining ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm a pretty simple person. It's been said and written.
I have wondered that. I mean, how much of you is in Forrest, or how much of Forrest is in you?
I think a lot. I mean, any writer, I think any serious writer, is going to identify with the main characters, and I do, and I did in Forrest. But it's not like I'm trying to write something autobiographic. It's more that I see Forrest. I'm in his head. Hell, I created him. I mean, I made him what he is. And if he walked in this door right now, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, if Tom Hanks walked in here and said, "I'm Forrest Gump," okay, that's fine. It wouldn't surprise me either. It is an odd thing to create a strong character, and obviously Gump being the focus of the whole book is your strong character. It's not as though I've got 8 or 9 main players here, and so in my own head, Forrest is just as real as you are sitting right across that microphone from me, and I can make him do what I want him to do.
Can you really, or does he have a mind of his own?
No, I make him do it. I got to. It's a big mistake to let the character take control of you. I learned that a long time ago.
But supposing that he has a terrific idea that doesn't quite mesh with what you had in mind, I mean, does he have no say in that?
Then you got me talking to myself. Now, see, the big problem with writing autobiographic characters, and I learned this from a master of the art, James Jones, who was like my daddy. And he was writing From Here to Eternity, and he'd obviously written it well before I knew him. But he told me once when I was writing my first book, it's called Better Times Than These, about Vietnam War, he said, whoever that main character you got is, make him as different from yourself as you possibly can. Because if you don't, then when it comes time that you have to make that character do something that is not in your mind what you might do, that character's running you. Because he won't do it. You just make him different. So that's what I did. It was a good instructive lesson, and I learned it, and I've abided by it. So, well, obviously, there's enough of me in Forrest Gump, just like there's enough of Jim Jones in the Pruitt character in From Here to Eternity, where you don't need to consciously try to model this on an autobiographical character, and that's kind of all technical, but it's true.
Well, but also when a writer uses the term autobiographical, it may be different than when a reader uses the term. It's not autobiographical in any sense in that any of these things actually happened to you in your life.
Well, it's kind of like having an evil twin, I mean, but you got to be able to run. You got to be able to run that horse. You can't let the horse run you. I mean, it is something that, sure, it's autobiographic in the sense that whatever I create is the product of my thought. But at the same time, what I try to construct in this particular book and in the last book was a character that was real to me. And I've got a face, I have a name, I have a inflection of dialect and certain accents, and a sense of his moral dignity or indignity, as the case might be. Once you have all that, then I have what to me is a real person. I mean, it may not be flesh and blood you can poke your finger in, but it's a real person to me. And as a writer, this is something that I think it's the highest thing you can strive for as a novelist, I believe, is create something in someone so real that you actually believe your own stuff.
Well, so many places along the way in the first story and in this, Forrest just tickles me. Does he tickle you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I find myself, which is it's embarrassing in some way, sometimes I find myself laughing at my own stuff. This will give book critics, I'm sure, something to poke me in the eye with, or whatever they want to do. But I think this is a good thing. I mean, when you're actually pleased with what you do, and you believe it enough to actually sit down and just read what you wrote and say, I like that. This is a sign of a good book, I believe. There may be some that disagree, and that's fine. That's what life's about.
Well, if it doesn't please you, if it doesn't make you laugh, it doesn't make you cry, it's not going to please us, make us laugh.
It ain't going to be any good.
I was fascinated when the movie first came out at how seriously people were analyzing just what Forrest Gump really meant. It was like layer upon layer of meaning and metaphor and hidden messages in the film. Is that what you had in mind when you wrote that story?
No, that's a bunch of horse shit. I wrote a piece about that. I finally, with a lot of amusement. I was up in North Carolina at the time, and people would send either fax or whatever these tomes, and it was a great intellectual struggle, it seemed to me, between the political left and the political right to claim Forrest Gump. And I remember watching a program where they all get on and argue. It's on CNN. I can't. With Kinsley and Buchanan.
And Crossfire.
Yeah, and so they are all arguing, well, Forrest Gump means that. And it really was charmingly quaint to me and amusing for a while. And all of a sudden, what happened was that the right-wing people somehow seemed to win out. And Buchanan and Rush Limbaugh and this bunch laid claim to Forrest Gump as the sort of conservatives' answer to God or whatever it was. Well, immediately this provoked the liberal element, which is, I guess, Kinsley and the rest of them, Time magazine. They immediately quit trying to claim Forrest Gump and turned on him like he was a snake, and began to say that, Forrest Gump is a horrible example to Americans because we're celebrating stupidity. I can't remember all the things. And so all of a sudden it occurred to me that people were trying to make this phenomenon a political football. Well, hell, all it was is an imaginary fictional character in a book and in a movie. And finally, somebody asked me to write a story about it. It was USA Today has a magazine, comes out on the weekend like Parade magazine, but it's called the USA Today magazine. And I did. They called it the Get Off My Gump, which is what I felt. And what I tried to explain there was that if Forrest Gump is none of these things, and if anybody wants to come out from under his or her particular political rock and start either seizing on Gump as a political football or kicking him in the ass because he might be somebody else's political football, I thought this was unfair and certainly not what I intended, and it was certainly not what Bob Zemeckis intended or Eric Roth, the screenwriter of the movie, intended, because I talked to all of them about it before I wrote that story, and nobody intended that. But this will happen. Anytime you got newspapers paying somebody $1,000 or whatever it is to write them a little 700-word column, they're going to come up with the latest phenomenon and try to couch it in political terms.
But still, look at what that says about how deeply and how truly we believe in the fidelity of that character, that we can talk about him as though he were a real person and talk about what he represents in political terms because he's so real to us.
Well, that's so. It's not just gratifying, it's astonishing. But, and it goes on, and I continue to be astonished, that the mail that I get, and there's a lot of it, has been in the last year or so, you find people who really believe that Forrest Gump exists. I mean, even though they know it's just a character on the screen. And that has fascinated me. Because there are people, especially a little, kids, school kids, they believe this character is a real character. And it's like, to me, he is. And to them, he is, and that's fine. But it shows you a lot about what the movies can do and what a good actor like Tom Hanks can do. I was recently in California at some ceremony that had to do with this Gump business, and ran into Tom Hanks. And we had a little private moment there. He says, I'm not sure if either of us have done the other a favor here. And I said, why is that, Tom? He said, because for the rest of my life, if I played Hamlet better than Laurence Olivier, I will always be Forrest Gump. He said, if I'm 75 years old and broke, I'm at a cheap comedy club on Sunset Strip, I will be doing Forrest Gump imitations. And I said, I hadn't exactly thought about that, but come to think of it, here I could probably write the Bible. Something else. I will always be remembered as the guy that wrote Forrest Gump.
Is that going to be the last Forrest Gump book?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I may do like Joe Heller, he just did a sequel to Catch-22, but Joe, but I need another 15 or 20 years, but, by that time I'll probably be dead or something. So I think we can safely say that this pretty well finishes up Old Forrest, but it's really just a continuation of the first book. If you just put them both in one book, it just goes right there. I mean, it would work. It's just 15 more years where I get to poke fun at stuffed shirts and pompous institutions, and also tell a little story about Forrest and Big Forrest, who's an idiot, and his son, who's a genius.
Winston Groom died in 2020. He was 77. Now you can get your copy of Gump and Company by Winston Groom by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Now, while you're at heardeverything.com, don't miss my 1990 interview with another author who created a character that has become part of our popular culture, the creator of Rambo, David Morrell.
The character has almost taken on a life of his own, and I've taken to calling myself Rambo's father. And because he has grown up, as it were. The Oxford English Dictionary has officially declared Rambo as a word.
And my 1996 conversation with the author who created a phrase that has now become part of our everyday lexicon, the author of Catch-22, Joseph Heller.
Scarcely a week goes by that I don't find either a mention of the title Catch-22 or a reference to something in it that reminds the colonist of something going on in business and government.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, the Boston Celtics, they used to be the dynasty of the NBA. We'll revisit my 1988 interview with Boston Celtics legend Bob Cousy.
In some places, the Celtics actually have as close to a third of the house. Here you are, the home team, and there's a third of the people there rooting for the Celtics.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.